So this past week has brought some hope to a possible beginning of the end of the conflict that has plagued Israel for over 14 months already. Why it happened this past week would be total speculation. But what has happened is not speculation. We know what happened. We don't know why it happened this week and didn't happen a month ago or 2 months ago, but we know for sure what has happened. A ceasefire has taken place with Hezbollah with terms that were pretty much dictated by Israel and accepted by Hezbollah. Why do I say that? Well, listen to the terms. Hezbollah will retreat beyond the Litani River, and the Lebanese army will take up positions in southern Lebanon at the border with Israel. Hezbollah has 60 days to end its military presence in southern Lebanon. Israelis will withdraw at the same pace over the same period of time, and the Lebanese army will take up positions in southern Lebanon. The ceasefire is meant to be permanent, and negotiations to resolve issues are to take place with no resorting to violence. The Lebanese government will prevent Hezbollah and all other armed groups from carrying out any terrorist operations against Israel, including the launching of missiles into Israeli territory. So why is that Israeli conditions? Because actually, we've been there already. This is exactly the deal that was made in 2006. That was the time when when Hezbollah came into Israel, kidnapped a few Israeli soldiers. Israel responded with such fury that even Nasrallah, may his memory be destroyed, Yimach Shmo, Nasrallah, who was then leader of Hezbollah, said, if I had known then how Israel would have responded, I would have never done it. Well, this time, he did the same thing, and it ended in his death and tremendous destruction to Hezbollah. So after that conflict in 2006, a UN resolution, which Israel agreed to, Resolution 1701, Security Council resolution. General Assembly resolution means nothing in the United Nations, absolutely nothing. Only this was Security Council, which means nobody vetoed it. If the United States didn't veto it, it meant that Israel agreed to it. That resolution included Hezbollah retreating north of the Litani. It called for the disarmament of armed groups in Lebanon, 10,000 Lebanese troops to deploy in the south to enforce the agreement. That army was to dismantle all infrastructure and military positions and confiscate all unauthorized arms. That was the deal in 2006. That's the deal this time. Now, obviously, asterisk, the deal didn't work. It was never enforced. The Lebanese army never took positions in the south, and Hezbollah never retreated to the Litani. The whole thing was a fake. But it did get a ceasefire until October 8th of 2023. So there was quiet from 2016 to 2023, but we now know that they had built up a tremendous armament, over 100,000 missiles, and incredible tunnels with the intention of doing what happened in Gaza, an invasion of the north and a slaughter of northern Israeli civilians. The agreement also calls for the Lebanese army to stop all unauthorized entries of weapons into Lebanon and to dismantle any unauthorized weapons production facilities. Well, Israel's doing that currently. They are destroying, in fact, yesterday they destroyed another missile factory that they found in Syria. The Lebanese army, however, said the following, and people didn't pay attention to this. It says, we do not have the resources, the money, or the manpower, or the equipment to fulfill these obligations. So in the agreement, which most people never read, this new agreement, It calls upon the United States and France to work with the international community to provide support and improve the Lebanese army's capabilities, which would be wonderful if they actually do it. So all this agreement is exactly what we want. The only question is anybody actually going to do it? Western nations believe Hezbollah has been so degraded that the Lebanese army, in fact, can take over. The United States will chair the committee that will monitor, verify, and assist in ensuring enforcement of both sides' commitments. That was Israel's demands. It has to be the United States and not the EU and not the UN. The only country that Israel could put any trust in is America. And Israel, and this is the key, and President Biden asserted this very, very strongly when he announced the agreement. Israel have the right to respond to any violations, right? And that means immediately. Any violations will be immediately responded to. In the past, what they usually do is they say to Israel, it's not that big a violation. They only shot 4 missiles. What are you so upset about? Take it easy. Right? Don't respond too strongly or don't respond at all. That's gone. That doesn't exist anymore. Any violation will be immediately responded to by Israel with support from America. So the end of hostilities, at least now, with the withdrawal of Israeli troops in southern Lebanon over the next 60 days, the end of missiles flying into Israel from the north, are all things to be very thankful for. It will lead, not immediately because no one trusts them, but eventually, if it holds, 80,000 Israelis will return to their homes in the north. The Lebanese are already, this is interesting, the Lebanese began returning to their homes in the south 2 minutes after this was announced. Why? Because the Lebanese know something. The Israelis will never break a ceasefire, has never broken a ceasefire. And why aren't the Israelis returning to their homes yet? Because they know for sure they will break the ceasefire. They're just not sure how. Will it be missiles? Or will it just be some mortars and moving troops into the south? So the Lebanese are going into the south, and the Israelis are waiting cautiously. So let's analyze this and see what the pitfalls are. Obviously, the good things are if it's actually observed, it in essence is a cessation of hostilities and almost a peace treaty, if it's observed. So here are the pitfalls. The retreat of Hezbollah military from southern Lebanon, that's huge. Israel found, as we know, tunnels that reached the border with Israel, and they found plans to execute an October 7th-like attack on northern kibbutzim and towns. Those tunnels have been dismantled. Hezbollah will not be within 20 miles of the border, so any kind of sneak attack would be impossible. That's the whole purpose of getting them 20 miles away. You can't move 20 miles without being detected by Israeli technology. They know. You can't move a mile, let alone, certainly can't move 20 miles. With the tunnels destroyed by Israel, they can't be rebuilt unless Hezbollah comes back to southern Lebanon. So what's the downside? Well, who's going to stop Hezbollah soldiers from dressing up as civilians and taking positions right at the border? Right? Oh, the Lebanese army. Well, who believes that? Right? Who believes the Lebanese army is going to confront Hezbollah? They never have. Perhaps they will. That's the test. In fact, it already happened. Within 12 hours after the agreement, Israel found Hezbollah troops going south, dressed up as civilians. Now, how does Israel know they're civilians? What do we know about Israel's intelligence? But after they pulled off the beeper trick, we assume they have intelligence. They know who the Hezbollah soldiers are. And they immediately responded and killed dozens of them. Right? It was announced that Israel broke the ceasefire and killed Lebanese civilians. That was obviously a lie. It was Hezbollah soldiers. And America said nothing, because the agreement is you can respond immediately. So we have to wait and see, is Hezbollah really not going to take up positions in southern Lebanon? As we said, the Lebanese army has never confronted Hezbollah in the past. Will they this time? Will they prevent smuggling of weapons to the south? We spent years preparing the Afghan army to confront the Taliban. How long did the confrontation last? Less than 24 hours, the Afghan army collapsed and surrendered to the Taliban. That is why Israel insisted on her right to stop any violations by Hezbollah by entering Lebanon either by air or by ground if necessary. The UN is completely out of it. No one will trust the UN to prevent Hezbollah from doing anything it wants to do because the UN has never prevented anyone, let alone Hezbollah, from doing what they want to do. So Israel's insistence that the UN be excluded was accepted by America and accepted, at least at this time, by Hezbollah. And President Biden affirmed that very strongly in his speech. And we know that no matter what the provocation by Hezbollah, we know the world, except America, will condemn Israel anyway, because they will say Israel has overreacted or violated the agreement. But America will stand by Israel, and that's the key. The good news is that Hezbollah has been so degraded that it's unlikely we will hear anything from them for quite some time. One key element that isn't directly addressed is the resupplying of Hezbollah's missile stockpiles by Iran. Can Israel act against any attempts to resupply Israel by Iran? Well, she's doing that right now in Syria. If you hear about bombings in Syria, you wonder what's Syria got to do with anything? Well, if you look at the map, that's where the weapons come in from Iran, and Israel has been blowing up weapons manufacturing facilities in Syria and attempts to bring more weapons to Hezbollah. The world stood by while Egypt resupplied Hamas. That's one of the greatest scandals that nobody ever talks about in the media. Egypt was resupplying Hamas while making believe she was trying to negotiate a peace. Qatar floated them financially. Why will things be different this time is the question, and only time will tell. All armed groups that are not Lebanese military are supposed to be disarmed, but that was the same thing last time around, and nobody did it. So will it be ignored as not to embarrass the ineffectiveness of the Lebanese army? We don't know. There will be bribes. There will be Hezbollah sympathizers in the Lebanese army who will let it go unchallenged. So in a few years, we could have a fully armed Hezbollah group closer and closer to Israel's border, and we're resupplied with 100,000 missiles, and we're back to the beginning. There are those who argue that Lebanon wants its country back and that Israel will move quickly against any violations. But if the Lebanese army doesn't control the airport and the seaport, then resupplying Hezbollah will happen. That will be the key. Will the Lebanese army take up positions at the ports and at the airport? Israel will control the borders. No trucks are coming across. But Israel cannot control an airport unless she has military there, and that's not going to be acceptable. Now the political import. We have to go back to when Hezbollah started launching missiles on October 8th, one day after the pogrom of October 7th. Hezbollah was doing this, why? To express solidarity with Gaza, with Hamas. Israel actually thought on October 7th that the Gazan incursion was not the main event. They thought the Gazan incursion was the sideshow to the real invasion that was coming from the north. They thought that for a very good reason. Hezbollah is exponentially more powerful than Hamas. There's no comparison. 100 to 150,000 real missiles, not the stuff that they had in Gaza, and an army 5 times the size. Hamas, in fact, anticipated a Hezbollah invasion from the north. Israel did too, which explains, by the way, why so much of the army, while the fighting was taking place in Gaza, a lot of the army went north because they thought that's where the attack was coming. And it slowed down the response in the south, and we paid a terrible price for that. But militarily, history will say it made sense to assume Hezbollah would participate, and we had to get our army to the north. Missiles flew from Hezbollah, no invasion. Hamas has been adamant that it would not consider a ceasefire. Hezbollah has been adamant that it would not consider a ceasefire until Israel has stopped the war in Gaza and retreated from Gaza. That has not happened, yet Hezbollah has indeed agreed to the ceasefire without any commitment to an end to the hostilities in Gaza. That is the most important major political coup. Hezbollah has disconnected from Hamas. It's not their war anymore, leaving Hamas with absolutely no support anywhere anymore. Totally, completely isolated. Hezbollah has abandoned the Hamas terror group, at least for now, which tells us that what they accept is, and what they hope for, they understand Hamas is done. It's over. Gaza Strip is gone. What it will become, we don't know, but it's gone for the terrorists. But Hezbollah will remain strong in Lebanon. That's what they're hoping for. So they sacrifice Hamas to save themselves. So that leads us to ask why Israel might have agreed to this deal when they could repeat itself in 4 or 5 years. With Hamas isolated, out of missiles, its resupply route from Egypt through Rafah destroyed in spite of the fact the entire world tried to stop Israel from going into Rafah, Israel can now focus her complete, total attention on Hamas. With Hamas's military in essence destroyed, Hamas is now holding on to a thread, and the fighting is no longer an army against an army. It's an insurgency like we had in Iraq. The war is over, but the insurgency is not over, and we know how dangerous insurgencies are to the soldiers of Israel. It's hoping for a vote in the UN to force a ceasefire on Israel. That's what Hezbollah is hoping for. That's what Hamas is hoping for. It's something Biden has always vetoed, and it's hard to imagine if Biden vetoed it, that Trump would not also veto it. So it puts Israel in a very strong position against Hamas. So Hamas is isolated, can't get a resupply of weaponry it so desperately needs. Iran attacking Israel seems out of the question in the immediate future. Iran has been humiliated twice, and it isn't likely to want to challenge either Biden at the end of his term, where he has a free hand to do anything he wants, or Trump at the beginning of his term, because he's going to want to assert himself. So they see absolutely no one to turn to. It would appear that a surrender by Hamas is not far off, although an insurgency will continue. At least that's the calculation Israel is making. Then begins the really hard work of putting together a coalition of moderate Arab states, moderate Palestinians, with Americans, French, British backing to create a moderate government in Gaza and start the reconstruction. That reconstruction will put Gaza back on its feet economically, because sadly, as we know, after a lot of destruction, there's an economic boom, right? War is very profitable. It's very good business. A lot of money is going to flow into Gaza to rebuild it, and everybody there has a job. They're all going to work rebuilding it. So it will allow Israel to stand up to any terror insurgency from the remnants of Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Israel cannot rule in Gaza, but she can't allow Hamas to regroup. That will depend on the new government that is established in Gaza that doesn't include the presence of an Israeli military. The pitfalls are many with this agreement, but the benefits are very enticing. What we know now, and Hezbollah and Hamas have learned, is they cannot stand up to the Israeli military, and they will not get America to back down and abandon Israel. They thought both would happen. They truly believed that between an attack from Gaza, an attack from Hezbollah, an attack from Iran, and the Israeli Arabs, this was the most absurd idea, they believed the Israeli Arabs would rise up and there would be a civil war and Israel would be attacked from all sides and they'd win the battle. They truly believed it. They obviously were completely wrong, and they've learned that lesson. Iran has learned a very powerful lesson as well. The West will not allow attacks on Israel from Iran. It is done with the threats to its shipping that emanate from Iranian proxies. It will not be tolerated anymore. So what we have seen, and the entire Arab world has seen, as the rest of the world, is that Israel is unbelievably resilient, amazingly powerful, and has the greatest intelligence agency in the world. It failed on October 7th, but has regrouped and asserted itself in an amazing and powerful way. It has the best military, and it has by far the best weaponry in the Middle East, and most of all, Israel doesn't back down. Biden stood by Israel strongly for these past 14 months. There were some disagreements, particularly over Rafah, pressure at times on Israel, but the fact is, Israel went into Rafah. Israel assassinated the leaders of Hamas and Hezbollah, and the weapons from America flowed, and the support from America never waned. Congress stood by Israel. The American people stood by Israel. We understand there were demonstrations at universities, but they're a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage. There was something very interesting that I caught with the Macy's parade. They should learn, okay? You might want to mess with Columbia University and Yale universities. Don't mess with Macy's. Don't mess with Macy's. Within 3 minutes, the police were there arresting the demonstrators. Not because of their message, because they were illegally demonstrating. They were trying to block the parade. They were not arrested for their message. They can say anything they want. There's free speech. They were arrested for illegally demonstrating the same way they illegally demonstrated on universities. They were handcuffed and arrested within a few minutes and removed. And there were only a small number. But what interested me most, people at the parade were very upset, and they started chanting in opposition to the demonstrators. You know what they chanted? USA, USA. But they were demonstrating against Israel. You know why? Because those people at the parade understood these people are as anti-American as they are anti-Israel. They get it. They understand that the demonstrations on the college campuses were not just against Israel, not just for Hamas, but against America. So America stood by Israel. France, England, and others came forward and helped stop the Iranian attack. This was a coalition that Biden put together that was extremely powerful and unexpected. I don't think any of us would have expected France to fly planes to shoot down Iranian missiles to protect Israel. I would have never thought they would do it. Jordanians, I knew they would because they have a peace treaty with Israel, and Israel protects them, and they have to protect their skies. But France and England sending their planes into battle? It shocked me. The Saudis saw this, and I believe this will lead in the next few years to their entrance into the Abraham Accords. That will isolate Iran, and that can only be a good thing for the Middle East and the world. The one issue still unresolved, the most important and burning issue is Iran. Nuclear ambitions of Iran. That will become the focus of Israel. The Arab countries, because believe me, Saudi Arabia is as interested in Iran not having a nuclear weapon as Israel is, and the UAE is, and Bahrain is, and Jordan is, and Egypt is. Isolation. Iran is becoming increasingly isolated. And that will be the focus, as I said, of the Arab countries, America, and the EU in the coming months. With Iran's proxies defeated, like Hamas, degraded like Hezbollah, Iran becomes the focus. So maybe next Thanksgiving, we will be thankful for the elimination of these nuclear capabilities of Iran. And once you neutralize Iran, you get an overarching peace in the Middle East, When you have peace in the Middle East, with the oil, with Israeli technology, with the agriculture that Israel can help bring to those countries, to Gaza, with Lebanon thriving again as it once did, the economic boom will reach far beyond the Middle East and will have implications for the conflicts between America and Europe on the one hand, and Russia and China on the other hand. So right now we can celebrate that the North is quiet. Some Israelis will begin returning to their homes for Hanukkah. The end of Hamas and the Gazan war is not far off, and the potential of an isolation of Iran by next Hanukkah would give us a great deal to be thankful for and to celebrate. Meanwhile, we watch with certain hesitancy, knowing how these things can fall apart, but with great hope for a change in the Middle East that will create something as powerful as the Abraham Accords. A peace with Gaza, a peace with Lebanon, and the isolation of Iran. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will. And to this we can all say, Amen.